one small step for man, one giant leap So, I guess you want to do it again. Okay.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Neil, right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Hello, this is Brainstorm from Feed Your Mind. Today we will discuss proof that the moon landing never happened. And so I'm sure many of you have heard this before, that there's people that believe that the moon landing never happened. Most of you are programmed to instantly dismiss such a statement as ridiculous and not worth the time to investigate. This is a knee-jerk reaction, because the program of this reality that you live in has been promoted to you since you were born. And so now as you have become an adult, your instant reaction to such a statement that the moon landing was faked would be a complete shutdown and rejection without even thinking about it. And so if you give this video a listen, you will see that there is a reason why they would fake the moon landing. And the reason why they faked the moon landing is much deeper than you would have ever imagined. And so to begin our investigation, let's start with what scientists consider the moon to actually be. And so scientists are saying that the moon is orbiting around our Earth because of a random accident that occurred during the formation of the Earth. When the Earth was molten, they say some type of planetoid struck the Earth and broke off a chunk of the Earth, and that ended up becoming our moon. And so if that was such a unique accident that occurred to create our moon, then why do scientists insist that there's moons that circle all of these other planets? Did those just happen to be strange freak accidents as well? And so for the moon to be this convenient mistake that happened to produce a moon for us that circles the Earth at night and shines as an accidental nightlight for us, it also happens to keep perfect time for us as well, as we use the moon to generate our calendars and our months. And we pay close attention to the cycles of the moon in order to help keep time. And so it's pretty clear that the moon is some type of timekeeping device. And it also appears to be intentionally put in the sky as a nighttime sun. Also, if the moon was such an accident, why do we only always just see one side of it? For it to be rotating at such a perfect gravitational lock with our Earth just seems to be a little bit too perfect for us to never see any indication of a rotating moon as it's orbiting around our Earth. There doesn't ever appear to be not even the slightest sign that the moon is rotating as it is orbiting.
Okay, so here's what I see. I don't know what you see. I don't see any of the clouds moving. The clouds are completely static. The rotation of the moon is non-existent because that dark spot stays in the same place, even though the Earth itself is rotating. So the moon should be rotating because it's not correct the way they've made the moon static. Now also, this is July 16th, so this is supposed to be summer. So the tilt of the Earth is completely wrong.
And so if you ever questioned what the motive for faking the moon landing would be, it all begins with the space race. And so after Admiral Byrd's final mission in Antarctica, you got NASA that pops up and the Antarctic Treaty that pops up right around the same time. NASA was formed in order to control the skies and make sure that nobody gets high enough to realize that there is no outer space. And the Antarctic Treaty was created in order to keep people away from the edge, so that nosy people can't go down there and start poking their heads around and finding what Admiral Byrd found, which is the dome firmament structure, or how some of you might call the edge of the Earth. You see, that whole space race was just propaganda, with the U.S. and the Russians racing to be the first ones to land on the moon. Well, in July 20th of 1969, when the Americans were the first ones to land on the moon, why hasn't anybody else ever been to the moon since then? You see, with all of these space agencies around the world, especially the Russians, why would they just give up just because America made it there first? If there's a race going on and the winner crosses the finish line, do all of the runners just give up? Do they just walk away and hit the showers and take off and go home? No, they actually cross that finish line as well, even though they weren't the first ones. So why wouldn't any other country ever go to the moon is the question you must ask yourself. It's because there was no moon landing. One thing we must remember is that with all of the nations cooperating in hiding the flat earth, it doesn't take everybody in on it to hide it. So let's look at NASA, for example. It wouldn't take all of the workers of NASA in order to hide flat earth. It would only take a few departments to hide the flat earth because NASA works as a chain of command, and it's kind of like a pyramid structure where only the ones at the top need to know. The rest of the members on the way down to the very bottom are just workers. They just report to work and do what they're told. They're given orders. And just like most people, the rest of the NASA members have been indoctrinated into the whole heliocentric solar system globe model, so they wouldn't question anything about the Earth anyways. And that goes for the cooperation with the other space agencies, because everything with all of these different societies and countries is all operated by a small group of board members. There's evidence of a dome firmament that NASA is hiding from you. There's evidence that this Earth is flat. This information is powerful because once you understand that, you will begin to understand that mankind and our purpose here is much different than what we have been told. Mankind actually has a reason for being here. And so NASA felt that they had to create a program that would make it appear as if they went to the moon in order to produce a picture of Earth so that nobody ever questions this place that we live on for as long as they could keep it that way. Once the astronauts got up to the moon and took the picture of Earth, the plan was for nobody to ever question those pictures. But it turns out there's plenty of evidence that the pictures that we have been given that allegedly show the pictures of Earth have all been admitted to be fake images. Watch my video proof all pictures of the Earth are fakes if you would like to see the evidence that these pictures are not real. So all of the footage that was taken of the moon landing was done in a Hollywood studio. In fact, there's many people that feel there's a specific Hollywood director that may have been involved in this whole moon landing Hollywood production. And that individual is Stanley Kubrick. And some people say that he left some clues in some of his films like The Shining and a few others that I don't have time to get into in this video. But it's some pretty interesting stuff. Here's some of the bloopers that were discovered during the moon landing missions. So who exactly filmed this spacecraft taking off from the moon going back to the Earth? I mean, the camera pans from the launching site all the way up to the sky. So what type of technology were they using back in the late 60s, early 70s to accomplish this camera trick? And that was some pretty impressive technology for them to be able to even launch from the moon back to Earth. I mean, wow. Seems pretty advanced for the late 70s, early 60s when they barely even had color television, let alone cell phones or anything like that. And you're telling me they could launch back to Earth and they had the technology to get enough boosting power for that spacecraft to find its way back to Earth? What about the shadows? They have a lot of shadows that were all different directions. The sun shines in one direction. Why would there be shadows going all over the place, you know? And then if you speed up the astronauts jumping around on the moon, all of a sudden it looks like they're moving in real time. And then you put the slow motion on, it looks like they're slowly bouncing around in gravity. There's tons of proof about how the moon landing is fake. I mean, what about the Van Allen radiation belt? How did the astronauts get past the Van Allen radiation belt? The Van Allen radiation belt is very deadly, according to CNN and NASA. So how did they get past it? They asked some astronauts about it, and they didn't even seem to know about it. They weren't aware that they even went through it. And then when pressed on it, they started saying, yeah, well, I guess we did go through it, but we're fine. So it just doesn't seem possible, because even the newest projects from NASA, the scientists are still trying to figure out how to get past the Van Allen radiation belt. So how did they do it back in the late 50s when the Orion project clearly admits that it's too dangerous to go through and they got to go through it twice?
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
Why did they lose all the telemetry data? Where's all the data from the moon landing? I mean, this is one of the most historical things that mankind has ever did, and somehow the telemetry data that collected all of the information about the moon landing trip goes missing. Let's roll the clip.
It was all recorded on these telemetry tapes. So where is this hard evidence?
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence, and as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
Could this be true? Mankind's first interplanetary exploration and the original science data is missing?
11, this is Houston, radio check, over.
If it's anywhere, it should be here at NASA's Goddard Space Center in Maryland, home to the National Space Science Data Archives.
This film you're making now, what is it?
This is a film trying to prove that Apollo 11 happened.
Does it have a name? I mean, do you have a name for it yet, or are you?
I'm calling it Did We Go?
Did we go? Okay.
Doesn't have it either. The Smithsonian doesn't have it. Johnson doesn't have it.
Right. We've been unable to track it down. I mean, we don't know where this telemetry data ended up, and we don't know what path it may have taken. So, unfortunately, I'm afraid I can't really give you much of a clue as to where this data ended up and whether it still exists or not.
So another thing to point out about these moon landings is that there is footage of the flag moving a bit suspiciously. So another suspicious proof that the moon landing didn't happen is that there was this strange press conference with Neil Armstrong and I believe it was Collins. So these so-called astronauts were asked about there not being any stars in any of the photos from the moon. And many people ask this question, where all of the footage that we get from NASA that includes astronauts never have any stars, right on to this day. And most of you would say that the camera doesn't pick up the stars because of some type of exposure issues where stars wouldn't be able to show up on film. But when these astronauts were asked about it during this press conference, their response to this question was that not only was there no stars in the photographs, but these astronauts are saying that they didn't see any stars while they were actually on the moon.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Neil, you were.
I don't remember seeing any.
Neil, you were.
I don't remember seeing any.
Neil, you were a little bit concerned, you said, about stubbing your toe.
Also, if you notice, their faces looked very nervous. They looked almost depressed. Something was very off with their energy. It wasn't quite the excitement you would expect from these guys if they really just came back from a trip to the moon. Looks like these guys are pretty bummed out. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of excitement, especially the type of excitement you would think you would be able to pick up on from some guys that just came back from the moon. You would think these guys would be pretty amped up about the whole journey there and back. But instead, it pretty much looks like the opposite of what you would expect to see from these guys. And so another thing about this moon landing is there is no blast crater seen from the pictures. And so after examining the available pictures of the landing module, which actually doesn't even look like something that would be able to fly through space. I mean, the landing module looks really like a joke. I mean, it looks like some type of prop from the set of Twilight Zone or something. I mean, this thing was really flying through space. And so this would have been late 60s, early 70s technology, and it just really didn't age well as far as the design of the spacecraft being a believable spacecraft. that was flying through space. So how could there be no evidence of a blast crater impression from when the landing module landed, but yet you have this perfectly detailed footprint left behind by one of the astronauts? I mean, the thing about this footprint itself is a proof as well, because if you analyze this footprint, you will notice that it's perfectly left in the sand as if it was wet sand. But on the moon, there's no moisture. So this is dry sand that this footprint would have been left in. There's no way dry sand could leave such a detailed footprint. The sand on the moon would be a fine lunar dust, not really something that's going to leave such a detailed and perfectly preserved footprint. And another thing is, when people have examined the boot that was said to have left that footprint, the boot didn't have the same type of texture. The boot had like a smooth type texture with no traction on the bottom of the astronaut suit. The print left on the moon had deep traction threads. And so that's definitely something worth pointing out. And so another thing about this moon landing is that all 6 of the moon landings are reported to have happened during one presidential administration. And so no president has ever claimed to land on the moon with humans on board since the Nixon administration.
If we want to get to deep space,
3, 2, 1, we have liftoff.
That's a whole other challenge. A human hasn't been there in over 40 years.
All 6 alleged moon landings took place during Nixon's presidency. So with all of the advancement in technology since 1972, no national leader has ever claimed to have landed a man on the moon. So to fully understand the significance of this, during the space race with the Russians and the U.S., wouldn't have the Russians eventually made it there as well? And then why wasn't any of the countries interested in actually colonizing the moon? I mean, with all of this talk about going to Mars, you would have thought that the moon would have been at least colonized before we think about going to Mars. I mean, think of all of the experience these astronauts would have in building cities on the moon. Wouldn't that be the perfect place to colonize first and figure it all out before going to Mars? You would think they would have built cities on the moon by now. The space race would have not stopped. If the moon landing was real, you would think that the countries would have been dividing up the moon into specific borders by now. Dividing it up like they did the Earth. I mean, we got the complete opposite. Nobody has ever went to the moon since then. So that seems to be pretty strange indeed. It doesn't seem very likely that not one country would be interested in going back to the moon since 1972. You would think there would be some type of base set up on the moon by now, or even where NASA would have put some type of high-definition camera from the moon pointed at Earth. You would think they would mount it on the side that's always facing us and have it pointed straight at the Earth in real time. Instead, it's the opposite. It's 2018, and the best evidence we have that anyone was on the moon is this low-quality, low-res, outdated black and white footage that is in desperate need of an update. There's no way that this should be the best footage that we have access to from the moon. In fact, there has been discussions that NASA would not have had the technology to transmit live broadcast TV back to Earth. And so some experts are saying that the technology during the time of the moon landing was not available to transmit a strong signal from the moon to Earth. The signals were much weaker back then and were not capable of broadcasting like was being presented during the moon landing. And so we see that the moon landing was staged in order to hide flat Earth. There's footage of NASA admitting that they haven't been beyond low Earth orbit.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
I mean, there's no point in really arguing with what their statement says. I mean, they're saying they haven't been beyond low Earth orbit. There's really nothing you can really counter that with because they said it themselves. You could try to justify what they said, but the statement that they made is specifically saying that they have not been beyond low Earth orbit. And so there's much more proofs that the moon landing never happened, but I'll close this video out with about 2 more. And so another proof that the moon landing never happened is the evidence we found when analyzing the alleged moon rocks. You see, these rocks that were said to have come from the surface of the moon were analyzed, and apparently there was some experts that analyzed these alleged moon rocks, and these moon rocks were determined to be from here on Earth. There's also reports that these rocks were determined to be petrified wood, and I've seen several articles. These moon rocks are not real. And so we will be discussing these moon rocks in more detail in another video, so make sure you click your notification bell so that you don't miss it. The last proof I'm going to cover in this video is about this recent report from Newsweek and a few other mainstream publications that reported on this YouTuber who discovered that there was an image in one of the photos from the moon landings. This individual said that he spotted what appears to be a person without a spacesuit on in the helmet visor of one of the astronauts. And so they say this is an image of what appears to be a man without a spacesuit on, which would be impossible because the image was taken from the moon. And so let me know what you think about this video in the comment section. Do you think the moon landings ever happened? My reaction used to be like most people. I used to think like, of course they went to the moon. It made no sense to me why you would even question that. But once you start to investigate the information we have been told, you will begin to see that a lot of the stuff doesn't add up. They're not really doing that good of a job of hiding it. They faked the moon landing to hide flat Earth. If you support my research, please join my Patreon page for as little as $1, and you will automatically get signed up to my email newsletters, where I will be able to send you sneak peeks to unreleased videos. To get rid of the fluoride in your water, visit HQH2O. Link is in the description box. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This has been another episode of Feed Your Mind. Thank you for tuning in. Signing off.